The blizzard had been screaming for 19 days straight when she walked out of it. Private First Class Chen saw her first. He was manning the guard shack, hunched over a space heater that barely cut through the -30 wind chill, when a shape materialized from the wall of white. No vehicle, no parachute, no warning, just a woman, walking alone through horizontal ice crystals and wind gusts exceeding 40 knots, moving with a kind of deliberate calm that made Chen's hand instinctively drop to his sidearm. She stopped 6 feet from the reinforced gate. Snow clung to her hair, her eyelashes, the shoulders of a nondescript jacket that offered no military insignia, no rank, no identification whatsoever. Her face was weathered in a way that suggested hard living rather than hard years. Somewhere around 40, though the exact number seemed deliberately obscured. She stood perfectly still, letting Chen study her, and said nothing. Chen keyed his radio. "Sergeant Hollis, you need to see this." By the time Staff Sergeant David Hollis reached the perimeter gate, for other soldiers had gathered. Specialist Walsh stood slightly apart from the group, his eyes narrowing as he studied the woman's posture. Private Rodriguez had his rifle half raised, uncertain whether this was a threat or a rescue, and Corporal Morrison, 6 feet of aggressive energy and barely contained ego, was already talking before Hollis could assess the situation. Well, Morrison stepped forward, thumbs hooked in his tactical vest. "Lost your hiking group, sweetheart?" The woman's eyes moved to Morrison. They were gray, the color of storm clouds, and they held an absolute stillness that made Chen's stomach clench. She didn't respond. "I said," Morrison began. "I heard you." Her voice was low, controlled, utterly devoid of fear. "You have approximately 40 minutes before a 9-person strike team hits your north wall. They've been staging half a click out for 3 days, waiting for your patrol rotation to create a gap. They're going to cut your power, jam your comms, and breach while you're stumbling in the dark. You can either listen to me now or you can die later." Silence. The wind howled through the gap in conversation, throwing ice crystals against the guard shack windows. Chen felt his mouth go dry. Morrison laughed. It was an ugly sound meant to diminish. 3 days? In this, he gestured at the blizzard. "Lady, nothing survives out there for 3 hours, let alone 3 days. I don't know what psych ward you wandered away from, but..." "Morrison," Hollis's voice cut through. "Stand down." But Morrison wasn't finished. He took another step toward the woman, using his height to loom over her. "No ID, no vehicle, no radio. You just walked out of a blizzard that's killed 17 people in 2 weeks, and you expect us to believe you got intel on some imaginary attack force." He snorted. "I don't know if you're a spy, a crazy person, or just really bad at this, but you're going to tell us exactly who you are and how you got here." The woman's expression didn't change. "I'm the person who's going to save your life, Corporal. If you let me..." Morrison's hand shot out and grabbed the front of her jacket. It was a mistake. The kind of mistake that ends careers in controlled environments and ends lives in uncontrolled ones. But the woman didn't resist. She let him search her, let him pull a single item from beneath her layers, a military dog tag on a steel chain. Morrison studied it, and his face twisted with confusion. The tag bore Trident with an integrated crosshair, a symbol he'd seen in training briefs, but never in person. Below it, a name, a service number, and nothing else. "Devgru?" Morrison's voice cracked slightly. "You expect me to believe you're SEAL Team 6? I don't expect you to believe anything." The woman held out her hand for the dog tag. Morrison didn't return it. "I expect you to survive long enough to verify. If that opening hooked you, buckle up. This story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage, and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to what happened next." Hollis stepped forward, his hand raised to stop Morrison from escalating further. "Ma'am, you understand why we can't just take your word for this. You appeared out of nowhere during the worst storm this region has seen in 40 years, with no transportation and no documentation. Protocol requires..." "I know what protocol requires." The woman's voice remained calm. "Protocol requires you detain me, verify my identity through encrypted channels that are currently non-functional because this storm has degraded your comms to emergency-only capacity, and hold me until command can dispatch a verification team that's currently 3 hours away in optimal conditions, which these are not. Protocol will take 6 to 8 hours. You have 40 minutes. Hollis felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. 8 soldiers under his watch. An outpost designed for monitoring, not combat. And a woman who either knew things she shouldn't know or was the most convincing liar he'd ever encountered. Detain her, he said finally. Weapons, locker cell, full restraints. Morrison grinned. With pleasure. They zip-tied her wrists behind her back. She didn't resist. They marched her through the compound, past the comm station that had been reduced to static and emergency frequencies, past the thermal imaging monitors that showed nothing but snow and false positives, past the 8 perimeter cameras that had become useless white screens. She walked with the steady, measured gait of someone who had been detained before and understood that cooperation was a tactical choice, not a surrender. The cell was concrete, 8 by 8, with a single overhead light, and a metal bench bolted to the wall. Morrison shoved her inside harder than necessary. She stumbled, caught herself, turned, and sat on the bench with her back straight and her zip-tied hands resting against her spine. Comfortable? Morrison asked. 40 minutes, she said. Starting now. Morrison pocketed her dog tag and slammed the cell door. Specialist Walsh had been watching. He'd been watching from the moment the woman emerged from the blizzard, and he continued watching via the cell's internal camera feed while the rest of the garrison returned to their posts. There was something about her that nagged at him, something his training had prepared him to recognize but that he couldn't quite name. The calluses. He'd noticed them when Morrison had restrained her. Her right thumb and index finger bore the distinctive markings of years of trigger work. Not the soft, uniform wear of recreational shooting, but the hardened, specific patterns that developed from thousands of hours behind precision rifle. He'd seen photographs of those calluses in sniper identification briefs. They were rare. They were distinctive. And they were exactly wrong for someone who was supposed to be a vagrant or a spy. Walsh. Chin appeared beside him, staring at the camera feed. What do you think? Walsh didn't answer immediately. On the screen, the woman had closed her eyes. She appeared to be sleeping, except that her breathing was too controlled. 4 counts in, 4 counts held, 4 counts out. It was tactical breathing, the kind taught operators to maintain readiness in high-stress situations. She wasn't sleeping. She was preparing. I think, Walsh said slowly, that we made a mistake. Morrison's an idiot, Chin agreed. But Sergeant Hollis made the call. What else were we supposed to do? Let a random woman give us orders. I'm not talking about protocol. Walsh pointed at the screen. Watch your hands. They watched for 3 minutes. Then 6. Then 12. And exactly at the 12-minute mark, the woman shifted her position. A subtle adjustment of weight that prevented her muscles from stiffening in the cold cell. It was deliberate, practiced, the kind of habitual movement that became automatic after years of long waits in hostile positions. She's keeping herself combat ready, Walsh murmured. In a cell, in zip ties. She's acting like she knows she's going to need to fight. Chen's face went pale. 40 minutes. She said 40 minutes. Walsh checked his watch. 16 minutes had passed since Morrison sealed the cell door. 24 minutes remained on whatever clock the woman was running. Get Hollis, Walsh said. Now. But Hollis was already dealing with another problem. The perimeter sensors had been glitching for days, false positives triggered by wind gusts and accumulated snow. And in the past hour, the glitches had intensified. Motion detected at the north wall. Motion detected at the east fence. Motion detected at the generator housing. The system was crying wolf so often that the garrison had learned to ignore it. Probably just ice buildup, Rodriguez said, tapping the sensor console. We've been getting these every 10 minutes since Thursday. Hollis stared at the display. The woman's words echoed in his mind. They'd been staging Have a Click Out for 3 days. Testing your response patterns. Probing your defenses. What if the false positives weren't glitches at all? What if someone had been deliberately triggering them, conditioning the garrison to dismiss genuine threats as system errors? Morrison. Hollis keyed his radio. I want a visual check on the north perimeter. Static crackled. Copy that. Visibility's maybe 20 feet. I'll take Lopez. Be quick. And Morrison, stay alert. Yes, sir. But Morrison wasn't alert. Morrison was still riding the high of humiliating a woman who dared to speak with authority, still replaying the moment he'd pocketed her dog tag like a trophy. still convinced that the entire situation was an elaborate waste of his time. In the holding cell, 22 minutes remained on the woman's clock. She opened her eyes, looked directly at the camera, and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a smile of someone who had done the math, calculated the probabilities, and arrived at a conclusion that the rest of them hadn't yet reached. It was the smile of someone who was no longer worried about herself. She was worried about them. Walsh burst into the operations room just as Hollis finished his radio call. "Sergeant, we need to talk about the detainee." "Walsh, I don't have time." "Her calluses." Walsh held up his phone, displaying a training document he'd saved months ago. "Look at this. DevGru sniper identification markers. Right thumb, index finger, specific where pattern from years of precision rifle work. She has them. I saw them when Morrison restrained her." Hollis took the phone, studied the image, looked up at Walsh with eyes that had begun to fill with something very close to dread. "You're saying she's actually—" "I'm saying we need to verify right now." Walsh pointed at the cell camera feed on the secondary monitor. "Look at her breathing. Look at her posture. Look at the way she repositions every 12 minutes to prevent muscle stiffness. That's not a crazy person, Sergeant. That's not a spy. That's an operator maintaining combat readiness in a holding position." Hollis felt the temperature in the room drop, or maybe it was just his blood running cold. He reached for his radio. "Morrison, report. What's your status on the north perimeter?" "Static." "Morrison, respond." More static. Then distantly the sound of wind, and then a voice that wasn't Morrison's. "Your corporal is fine. For now." The voice was male, calm, professional. "You have something we want. Produce it in the next 60 seconds, or we start sending pieces of him through your gate." The lights went out, not slowly, not with warning, just instant, absolute darkness that swallowed the operations room whole. Emergency batteries kicked in 3 seconds later, flooding the space with dim red illumination that painted every face the color of blood. Rodriguez lunged to the comms console, fingers flying across keys, and found exactly what the woman had predicted. Static on every frequency, jammers drowning out everything except the single channel the attackers had left open. They hit the main generator. Chun breathed. Backups got maybe 4 hours. Hollis's mind raced through the tactical reality. 8 defenders, 1 detained operator who might or might not be who she claimed, and a professional strike team that had just demonstrated the ability to approach within grabbing distance of the perimeter without triggering a single alarm. The sensor glitches made sense now. 3 days of conditioning, training the garrison to dismiss genuine threats as system errors, and it had worked perfectly. "Sergeant," Walsh's voice was tight. "The woman, she called this." "Exactly, down to the minute." Hollis was already moving toward the holding cell corridor. "Chun, Rodriguez, weapons up and hold this position. Walsh, you're with me." They found the cell door exactly as Morrison had left it. Sealed, locked, the woman sitting on her bench with the calm patience of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. The emergency lighting painted her in shades of crimson, and her gray eyes reflected the glow like chips of ice. 23 minutes early, she said. They must have gotten impatient. "Who are you?" Hollis demanded. "Who are they?" The first question doesn't matter right now. The second question is simpler. They're a 9-person PMC team. Well-equipped, well-trained, probably contracted through a Singapore-based shell company that specializes in deniable operations. They want something in this outpost, data, equipment, or a person, and they were willing to wait 3 weeks in lethal conditions to get it. "How do you know this?" The woman stood. Even zip-tied, even caged, she radiated a quiet authority that made Hollis understand, suddenly and completely, that she was exactly who she claimed to be. "Because I've been hunting them for 6 months. Because I tracked them to this valley 2 weeks ago. Because I've been surviving in that blizzard for the past 11 days, watching them watch you, learning their patterns, waiting for the right moment to intervene." She stepped toward the cell door. "That moment is now, Staff Sergeant. Either you release me, or you and your men die in the next 15 minutes. There's no third option." The radio on Hollis's belt crackled. The same professional male voice. 45 seconds remaining on your countdown, Staff Sergeant. We're not interested in killing soldiers who are just doing their jobs. Give us what we came for, and we walk away. Refuse, and your corporal loses his fingers one at a time until you change your mind. Hollis looked at the woman. at her calluses, at her tactical breathing, at the absolute certainty in her storm gray eyes. What do you need? My hands free, one sidearm, and for you to trust me for the next 10 minutes. He unholstered his knife and cut the zip ties. She rubbed her wrists once, economically, restoring circulation without wasting time. Where's your weapons locker? East corridor. But I know where it is. I've memorized your layout. She took the M9 pistol Hollis offered her, checked the chamber, verified the magazine, and moved toward the cell door with a fluidity that made Walsh's breath catch. How many men do you have still inside? 6, including us. Morrison and Lopez were on the north perimeter when they've got Morrison. Lopez? Unknown. Assume captured or dead. That means 8 defenders against 9 attackers. Except they don't know I'm free, and they don't know what I am. She paused at the doorway, listening to sounds Walsh couldn't hear. Your thermal cameras. Are they hardwired or wireless? Hardwired. Direct to the security station. Good. That means they can't jam them. Pull up the north wall feeds. I need to know exactly where they're breaching. Walsh scrambled to the nearest terminal, while Hollis followed the woman into the corridor. The emergency lighting cast long shadows, transforming the familiar outpost into a maze of red-tinged darkness. Somewhere outside, the blizzard continued to scream. I've got them, Walsh called. North wall, section 3. Looks like they're cutting through. Some kind of thermal lance. The woman nodded as if she'd expected nothing less. Estimated time to breach? 2 minutes. Maybe 3. Then we have 2 minutes. She turned to Hollis. Listen carefully. They're equipped with night vision, which means the darkness is their advantage, not yours. But I can take that away. How? Emergency lighting. It's dim, but it's still light. Their NV gear will auto-adjust. But if I kill the emergency power while they're inside, they'll be momentarily blind while their equipment recalibrates. That's my window. You're talking about plunging this entire compound into total darkness while a professional kill team is inside our walls. Yes, that's insane. The woman smiled, that same unsettling expression Walsh had seen on the cell camera. Staff Sergeant, I've spent the last 3 years operating in places where insane is the only option that keeps you alive. These men are good, but I'm better. And more importantly, I've been training in darkness since before most of them finished boot camp. She handed Hollis back his M9. Keep your men in the operations center. Seal the doors. Do not engage unless they breach your position directly. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, stay inside. I'll bring your corporal back. But 40 minutes, Staff Sergeant. That's what I told you when I walked out of that blizzard. 40 minutes until they breach your north wall. I was wrong by 23 minutes because they moved early. But everything else I said was accurate. She began moving toward the north corridor, her footsteps silent despite the concrete floor. Don't make the same mistake twice. Trust me. And then she was gone, swallowed by the red-tinted shadows, like a ghost returning to the darkness that had birthed her. Corporal Morrison was not having a good night. His wrists were zip-tied behind his back, the same position he'd forced on a woman barely 30 minutes earlier, and his face was pressed against frozen concrete while a boot rested on the back of his skull. The irony was not lost on him. The humiliation was complete. Radio silent, one of the attackers said. They're not responding to the ultimatum. Then we escalate. The leader, a tall man whose face Morrison couldn't see, knelt beside him. Corporal, do you have any dependents? Wife? Children? Anyone who would miss you if you stopped coming home? Morrison said nothing. I'll take that as a yes. The leader stood. Breaching team, go loud. If they won't cooperate, we'll take what we came for and leave them a message they won't forget. Morrison heard the hiss of a cutting torch against metal, the shriek of compromised steel, and the crash of a wall section giving way. Cold air flooded the breach point, carrying snowflakes that burned against his exposed skin. He counted footsteps. 3 men moving through the gap, spreading into the compound with professional efficiency. Contact, East Corridor, someone reported. Thermal shows 6 heat signatures clustered in the operations center. No movement. They're bunkering. The leader sounded almost disappointed. Predictable. Breaching team. Advance on the operations center. We'll extract the package and exfil before. The lights went out. Total darkness. Absolute. The kind of blackness that made Morrison's eyes ache as they searched desperately for any source of illumination. The emergency batteries had died, or been killed. NV up, the leader commanded. Switch to 3 shots. They came so fast they sounded like a single continuous noise. Crack, crack, crack. Impossibly precise, followed by the thud of bodies hitting concrete. Morrison couldn't see what was happening, but he could hear it. Hear the sudden chaos that erupted among the attackers. Hear the professional calm fracturing into something approaching panic. Contact. We have contact. Where? I don't see. 2 more shots. Another body fell. Morrison felt the boot on his skull lift as his captor spun toward the threat, and then a sound he would never forget, a whisper of movement in the darkness. Too fast to track, followed by a wet crack that spoke of broken vertebrae. The man standing over Morrison collapsed without a sound. Who's there? Someone was shouting now, all pretense of control abandoned. Sound off. Sound. A voice cut through the chaos. Female. Calm. Terrifyingly familiar. You're down 3 operators. The woman from the blizzard, the one Morrison had mocked, restrained, locked in a cell, was somewhere in the darkness, and she sounded like she was enjoying herself. The 2 at the breach point are dead. The one who was guarding your hostage is dead. That leaves 6 of you against one of me. Silence. The attackers had stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped doing anything except listening for a sound that would betray her position. You came here for something, the woman continued. Data, probably. Maybe equipment. It doesn't matter. You're not getting it. Here's your alternative. Withdraw to the breach point, return to your vehicles half a click north, and leave this outpost intact. You have 60 seconds to begin moving. Who the hell are you? The leader's voice had lost its professional smoothness. There was fear underneath now. Real fear. The kind that came from facing something you didn't understand. The wrong person to hunt. Commander. You're operating on intelligence that's 6 months out of date. You thought this was a soft target. Undermanned, undertrained, isolated by weather. You were wrong. We can wait you out. The storm will break eventually, and by the time it does, I'll have killed all of you. I've been hunting your employer's operations for half a year. I've dismantled teams better than yours in worse conditions than this. You have 50 seconds remaining. Morrison heard movement. Low voices conferring. The mathematics of combat being recalculated in real time. This isn't over. The leader said finally, we'll find out who you are. We'll. 40 seconds. Move. They moved. Morrison heard boots retreating toward the breach point. Heard the crunch of snow as 6 men withdrew into the blizzard. Heard engines starting in the distance as vehicles that had been staged half a click out began pulling away. Then hands on his zip ties. A knife cutting through the plastic. Get up, Corporal. Morrison rolled over and found himself staring at the woman he'd humiliated. The woman who had just killed 3 professional operators in total darkness and sent 6 more running with nothing but her voice. He couldn't find words. His brain was still processing the fact that he was alive. I thought. I know what you thought. Her voice held no anger, no recrimination, just a tired resignation that suggested she'd been underestimated before. Everyone thinks it until they don't. Can you walk? Yes. Then walk. Your sergeant is waiting. Staff Sergeant Hollis met them at the operations center door with his weapon raised and his eyes wide. The emergency lights had been restored. The woman had done something to the power distribution panel, and the dim red glow illuminated a scene that didn't make tactical sense. Morrison was alive. Lopez, found unconscious near the guard shack with a lump on his skull, but no lasting damage, was alive. And 3 professional operators lay dead in the north corridor, dropped with surgical precision in conditions that should have made accurate shooting impossible. How? Hollis asked. It was the only word his mind could form. The woman ejected the magazine from her borrowed M9, checked the remaining rounds, 3 expended, 12 remaining, and handed the weapon back to him. Training, she said simply. A lot of training. You killed 3 men in total darkness. I've been operating in darkness for 3 years, Staff Sergeant. When you spend enough time hunting in the shadows, you learn to see what others can't. She moved toward the breach point, studying the cut metal with the critical eye of someone cataloging tactical details. Your perimeter is compromised. The storm should keep them from returning tonight, but you'll want to reinforce this section before the weather breaks." "Who were they?" Chen asked. The young private looked shaken. They all looked shaken, but curiosity was beginning to override shock. PMC, foreign operators, private military contractors. The equipment on the bodies will trace back to a shell company registered in Singapore, which is itself a front for a network I've been dismantling for the past 6 months. They were here for data. Specifically, intelligence your outpost has been collecting on mountain pass traffic patterns. She paused. "Someone wants to know how much we see. How much we know. Who we're tracking. You said you've been hunting them." Hollis's voice was steadier now, the initial shock settling into focused attention. "For 6 months. Alone?" "Yes." "Why?" The woman turned to face him, and in the emergency lighting, Hollis saw something he hadn't noticed before. Scars. Thin, precise lines along her jaw, disappearing beneath her collar. The marks of someone who had been hurt badly once, and had continued working despite it. "Because 3 years ago, I ran an operation that went wrong. People died. People who were supposed to be protected. The network responsible escape accountability because they operate in shadows, through shell companies and cutouts and deniable assets. My government couldn't pursue them officially without creating diplomatic incidents, so they found someone who could pursue them unofficially." She spread her hands, slightly. "That's me. That's what I am now. A ghost hunting other ghosts." Dev grew. Walsh said quietly, "Your dog tag. That's real." It was. Now I'm something else. Something that doesn't have a name, or a rank, or an official existence. She looked at Morrison. "Speaking of which, I'd like my tag back, Corporal." Morrison's hand moved to his pocket automatically, producing the steel chain and its distinctive trident crosshair pendant. He held it out without meeting her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. The words sounded torn from somewhere deep. You looked, I assumed. I know what you assumed." She took the tag, studied it for a moment, and slipped it around her neck. "You assume that strength looks a certain way, that authority requires insignia, that a woman walking alone out of a blizzard couldn't possibly be more dangerous than the men who carry rifles and guard perimeters." Her voice softened slightly. "You're not the first to make that mistake. You probably won't be the last. But I almost got everyone killed. No, you followed protocol. Bad protocol. Applied rigidly in a situation that required flexibility, but protocol nonetheless. The failure wasn't in what you did. The failure was in what you believed." She moved toward the exit corridor, her footsteps as silent as they'd been in the darkness. "Remember that, Corporal. Carry it with you. Let it make you better." Morrison nodded slowly. Something had shifted in his posture. A subtle deflation of ego, a crack in the aggressive certainty that had defined him since the woman first appeared at the gate. "Wait." Hollis stepped forward. "You can't just leave. Command needs to debrief you. There are reports to file, chains of custody for the bodies, official accounting of Staff Sergeant." The woman paused at the doorway. "In 3 hours, your comms will be restored. Command will arrive by helicopter. They will find 3 bodies belonging to PMC contractors with untraceable equipment, a damaged perimeter, and 8 soldiers who successfully defended their position against a coordinated assault. And you? I was never here. That's not going to work. We have camera footage, witness statements, physical evidence. The footage will show an unknown individual assisting in the defense of this outpost. My face will be obscured by lighting conditions. There will be no identifying features captured." She smiled faintly. "I've been doing this for a long time, Staff Sergeant. I know how to disappear. But why?" Chen's voice cracked slightly. "Why help us if you're just going to vanish? Why not let us handle it ourselves?" The woman was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had lost its tactical edge, revealing something raw underneath. "Because 3 years ago, I failed to protect people who were counting on me. I've been trying to balance that ledger ever since." She looked at each of them in turn. Chung with his youth and idealism, Walsh with his careful attention, Rodriguez with his steadfast reliability, Hollis with his burden of command, and Morrison with his newly shattered assumptions. "You're soldiers. You serve something larger than yourselves. That matters. It matters enough that when I saw this team positioning against you, I couldn't walk away." She pulled her jacket tighter against the cold seeping through the breach point. Tell command what you need to tell them. Keep my involvement minimal. Say an unknown civilian assistant in defense. That's technically accurate. Let the classification system handle the rest. They'll have questions, Hollis said. Detailed questions. Forensic analysis of the shooting patterns, entry wounds, trajectories. And you'll answer that an individual with military training appeared, rendered assistance, and departed before identification could be established. It's vague. It's incomplete. It will drive your intelligence analyst crazy. She shrugged. But it's also true. The blizzard was breaking. Through the breach point, Staff Sergeant Hollis could see the first signs of change. Snow falling more vertically than horizontally, visibility extending from 20 feet to 50 to nearly 100. After 19 days of unrelenting white, the sky was beginning to show hints of gray. The woman noticed it too. She stood at the edge of the compound, studying the shifting weather with the focused attention of someone who had learned to read the sky as a survival mechanism. Storm's dying, she said. Your helicopters will be able to get through within 2 hours, and you'll be gone by then. Yes. Hollis moved to stand beside her. In the improving visibility, he could see her more clearly now. The network of fine scars, the calloused hands, the way she held herself like a compressed spring even in moments of apparent relaxation. She was, he realized, the most dangerous person he'd ever met, and also, paradoxically, the most human. What happens to the network you're hunting? He asked. The Singapore Shell Company, the PMC operations, does this stop them? It slows them. The men who withdrew will report what happened here, what I did. That information will filter upward, make their employers nervous, force them to reconsider future operations. She paused. But no, it doesn't stop them. Networks like this don't die with a single blow. They adapt. They evolve. They find new methods and new personnel. So you keep hunting. I keep hunting. For how long? The woman turned to face him, and Hollis saw something in her storm gray eyes that he hadn't expected. Exhaustion. Not the physical kind. She seemed capable of operating indefinitely on minimal resources, but something deeper. A weariness that came from carrying weight that never got lighter. For as long as it takes, she said quietly. Or until it takes me. That's not a way to live. No, but it's the way I live now. She adjusted the collar of her jacket, hiding the scars. 3 years ago, I had a team. I had a mission. I had people who trusted me to bring them home. I failed. Some days, I think the hunting is atonement. Other days, I think it's just something to do while I wait for the mathematics to catch up. Mathematics, I operate alone. They operate in teams. Sooner or later, the numbers win. She said it without self-pity, without drama, just a simple statement of probabilistic reality. I've made peace with that. What I haven't made peace with is letting it happen before I've done enough good to balance the ledger. Hollis didn't know what to say. The woman, Captain Thornton, according to the dog tag she reclaimed, was telling him something he wasn't equipped to process, that she was a weapon pointed at the darkness, and that weapons, eventually, break. You could come in, he said finally, report to command. Let them provide backup support. And become official? She smiled faintly. That's not how this works, Staff Sergeant. I'm valuable precisely because I don't exist. The moment I become documented, trackable, accountable, I become vulnerable. And the people I'm hunting become aware that someone is coming for them. Right now, they're scare shadows. I want to keep them that way. The wind shifted, and for a moment, Hollis smelled something other than snow. Blood. The 3 bodies in the north corridor were still where they'd fallen, and the cleanup would take hours. What do I tell my men? He asked. They just watched you do the impossible. They're going to have questions. Tell them the truth. That strength doesn't always look the way they expect. That assumptions kill faster than bullets. That when someone walks out of a blizzard and says 40 minutes, they should pay attention. She began walking toward the perimeter gate. And tell Morrison, tell him that the embarrassment he's feeling right now is actually the most important thing that's ever happened to him. If he lets it change him instead of making him angry, he'll become the kind of officer who saves lives instead of risking them. And me? She paused, looking back over her shoulder. You made the right call, Staff Sergeant. You detained me. That was correct given the information you had. And you released me when the situation changed. That was also correct. Command will question your judgment, but your men are alive because you were flexible enough to trust someone you didn't understand. She held his gaze. That's rare. Don't lose it. Will I ever see you again? Probably not. She turned back toward the gate. But you'll know I'm out there, somewhere in the shadows, hunting the things that hunt people like your soldiers. And maybe one day, when you're training the next generation of sergeants, you'll tell them the story of the woman who walked out of a blizzard. You'll teach them what you learned, which is what? That the most dangerous person in any room rarely looks the part. That competence doesn't require introduction. And that when someone warns you, truly warns you, you listen. Even if everything about them contradicts what you think you know. She reached the gate, paused with one hand on the frozen metal, and looked back one final time. 40 minutes, Staff Sergeant. That's what I gave you. 40 minutes and a chance to survive. Her voice carried clearly across the distance between them. Use the rest of your time wisely. Then she stepped through the gate, into the thinning blizzard, and disappeared. Command arrived in 2 UH-60 Blackhawks exactly 3 hours and 17 minutes after the attack ended. By then, the storm had broken fully, revealing a crystalline mountain landscape that made the previous 19 days seem impossible. Colonel Andrea Foster, head of regional operations, stepped off the lead helicopter with an expression that suggested she had been briefed on something she didn't entirely believe. Hollis. She approached the staff sergeant with long, purposeful strides. Report. Hollis told her what he had decided to tell her, that a 9-person PMC team had breached the North Wall, that an unknown civilian with apparent military training had appeared and rendered assistance, that 3 attackers had been neutralized and 6 had withdrawn, that all garrison personnel had survived. He did not mention the woman's name. He did not mention her dog tag. He did not mention that she had walked into a blizzard and disappeared as if she'd never existed. Colonel Foster listened without interrupting. When Hollis finished, she studied him with eyes that had seen through better lies than this one. An unknown civilian, she repeated. Yes, ma'am. With military training. Extensive military training, ma'am. Who appeared during a 3-week blizzard, assisted in repelling a coordinated assault, and then vanished before debriefing. That's correct, ma'am. Foster's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Something that might have been recognition. And you have no idea who this individual was. No, ma'am. No identifying features. No documentation. No recordings that show a clear face. The lighting conditions were challenging, ma'am. Foster was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she nodded. The bodies will be processed through military intelligence. The shell company connections will be traced or not traced, depending on what we find. The incident will be classified at a level that prevents anyone from asking questions that can't be answered. She paused. And the unknown civilian will remain unknown. Ma'am, some things, Staff Sergeant, are better left in shadows. Foster's voice carried a weight that suggested personal knowledge. Some people operate in spaces that don't appear on organizational charts. Their work is invisible by necessity. Their contributions are off-book. Hollis felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. You know who she is. I know nothing, Staff Sergeant, and neither do you. What I do know is that 8 soldiers are alive today who might not have been, and that 3 hostile operators will never threaten anyone again. The mathematics favor our side for once. She turned toward the breach point, where her forensics team was beginning to work. You did well. Your men did well. Accept the commendation that's coming and don't ask questions that don't have answers. Yes, ma'am. Morrison appeared beside Hollis as the colonel walked away. The corporal looked different somehow, smaller, more thoughtful, the aggressive energy replaced by something approaching humility. She's going to bury it, Morrison said quietly. The whole thing. Yes. Good. Morrison stared at the gate where the woman had disappeared. I spent 18 months thinking I understood how this world works, thinking I knew who the operators were, who the threats were, who deserved respect and who didn't. He shook his head slowly. I was so wrong. We all were. No. Morrison's voice hardened with self-directed anger. You followed protocol. You made decisions based on available information. Me? I made assumptions based on what I wanted to believe. That she was nobody. That she was weak. That I was a capable one, and she was a problem. He pulled something from his pocket, a small notebook with a blank cover. I started this last night, writing down everything I did wrong, every assumption, every blind spot. I'm going to read it every morning until I stop being the person who needs to read it. Hollis studied the younger man with new eyes. Something had cracked in Morrison, but not broken. Instead of shattering, he was rebuilding differently, better. OCS applications are open next month. Hollis said quietly, "You should apply." After what I did, because of what you learned, Hollis put a hand on Morrison's shoulder. The best officers I've ever known are the ones who screwed up badly once and never forgot it, who carry their failures like weights, using them to build strength instead of letting them drag them down. You have that now. Don't waste it. Morrison nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't deflect. He just accepted the truth of what had happened and began the long work of becoming someone better. 3 weeks later, Master Sergeant David Hollis stood at the front of the classroom at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The promotion had come through faster than expected, a result he suspected of Colonel Foster's classified report and whatever weight she had thrown behind his name. Now he was here, teaching defensive tactics to a fresh rotation of NCOs, passing on the lessons that had almost cost him everything. Today we're discussing threat assessment, he told the assembled soldiers. Specifically, how our assumptions can become weapons used against us. He clicked to the first slide, a photograph of a snow-covered mountain outpost, the breach point still visible in the north wall. 3 months ago, I was in command of this position when an unknown individual approached our perimeter. No vehicle, no identification, no radio, just a woman, walking alone out of the worst blizzard in 40 years, claiming to have intelligence about an imminent attack. The soldiers shifted in their seats. They could tell from Hollis's tone that this wasn't a hypothetical scenario. My team detained her, restrained her, locked her in a holding cell. We followed protocol to the letter, and in doing so, we nearly got ourselves killed. He clicked to the next slide, a tactical diagram of the breach point, with arrows indicating the attacker's entry positions. Because while we were busy treating her as a threat, the actual threat was cutting through our perimeter exactly as she'd warned us they would. "Sir," one of the soldiers raised his hand. "How did you know she was legitimate?" "I didn't. Not until it was almost too late." Hollis clicked to another slide, a close-up of calloused hands. One of my specialists noticed details I'd missed. The wear patterns on her fingers from years of precision rifle work, her tactical breathing, the way she repositioned every 12 minutes to prevent muscle stiffness. All signs an experienced operator, signs we've been trained to recognize but hadn't bothered to look for. He let that sink in before continuing. The lesson isn't that we should have trusted her immediately. Following protocol on unidentified individuals is correct. The lesson is that protocol should be a starting point, not an ending point. When evidence begins contradicting your assumptions, you need to be flexible enough to reassess. He clicked to the final slide, a single question in bold text. Because the most dangerous person in any room rarely looks the part. After the class ended, Hollis returned to his office and found an envelope on his desk. No postmark, no return address, just his name, written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper with 6 words. Still hunting, still watching, stay sharp. And below that, a simple symbol, a trident with an integrated crosshair. Hollis smiled. 2 months after Fort Campbell, Second Lieutenant James Morrison graduated from Officer Candidate School at the top of his class. The ceremony was standard, handshakes, photographs, families cheering from plastic seats. But Morrison felt anything but standard. He felt rebuilt. His classmates had noticed a change early in the program. The Morrison who showed up for training was different from the Morrison who had once humiliated a woman at a snowy checkpoint. This Morrison listened before speaking. Defer to expertise regardless of its source. Ask questions instead of making declarations. And every morning, before PT, he read from a battered notebook filled with lessons written in his own hand. Don't assume weakness from appearance. Listen to warnings, especially unlikely ones. Competence speaks for itself, let it. The program instructors had commented on his unusual humility. One of them, a retired colonel with 3 combat tours, had pulled him aside during the final week. "Morrison, you're one of the most promising candidates I've seen in years. but you carry yourself like someone who's already learned a hard lesson. Mind sharing what it was? Morrison had thought about how to answer, how much to reveal, how to explain an event that remained classified at levels he couldn't even verify. I met someone once, he said finally, someone I dismissed because they didn't match my expectations. And in the time it took me to realize my mistake, I almost got everyone I cared about killed. He paused. She saved us anyway. And then she disappeared. And I've been trying to become the kind of officer who wouldn't have needed saving ever since. The colonel had studied him for a long moment. That's a good lesson, he said quietly. Most people go their whole careers without learning it. You learned it before you even started. Now, watching his family approach across the parade ground, Morrison felt the weight of that lesson settling into his bones. He had a long career ahead of him. Soldiers would depend on his judgment. Lives would hang on his decisions. And somewhere in shadows he couldn't see, a woman with storm gray eyes was still hunting the darkness, still protecting people who would never know her name. He would honor that sacrifice by becoming worthy of it. Specialist Chun, now Sergeant Chun, received his signals intelligence assignment 3 months after the outpost incident. The work was quieter than ground operations, analyzing communication intercepts, tracking electronic signatures, building patterns from fragments of data, but he found satisfaction in its precision. In a way, it reminded him of the woman who had walked out of the blizzard, someone who saw things others missed, who found truth in details everyone else ignored. He never forgot what she'd said to Morrison, that strength doesn't always look the way you expect. He'd been young and idealistic when she appeared at the gate, still believing that heroism meant dramatic rescues and dramatic sacrifices. She'd shown him something different, something quieter, the heroism of patience, the courage of appearing weak when you were anything but, the discipline required to wait, to watch, to act only when action mattered most. Walsh, predictably, ended up in intelligence analysis. His talent for noticing details, the calluses, the breathing patterns, the subtle repositioning, had been recognized and cultivated. Now he spent his days studying surveillance feeds and tactical reports, looking for the signs that revealed truth beneath surface appearance. Every time he identified a hidden threat, a concealed weapon, a deception in body language, he thought of the holding cell camera feed and the woman who had been preparing for a combat while everyone else assumed she was sleeping. Rodriguez continued in infantry, eventually becoming a master sergeant himself. He told the outpost story to his soldiers during quieter moments, a cautionary tale about assumption and adaptation, about the importance of remaining flexible when the situation contradicted expectations. He left the woman's identity vague, as Hollis had instructed, but the lesson landed every time. And Private Lopez, who had woken up with a lump on his skull and no memory of how he'd gotten it, eventually pieced together what had happened from the others' accounts. He became one of the few people who could claim to have been taken down by a DevGru Ghost operative and survived. It was, he decided, the most interesting thing that would ever happen to him. The outpost itself was reinforced, its perimeter upgraded with redundant sensors and hardened breach points. Colonel Foster's report led to a systematic review of isolated facility defenses across the theater, resulting in protocols that would save lives in dozens of future incidents. The woman's warning had rippled outward, protecting soldiers she would never meet. And somewhere, in a shadowed corner of the world that didn't appear on any map, Captain Sarah Thornton continued her work. The network she hunted had been wounded by the outpost failure, but wounds healed. New operators replaced fallen ones. Shell companies restructured. Deniable assets regrouped. She tracked them with patience honed by years of invisible warfare, closed on them with discipline that never wavered. And when the time came, when the mathematics finally caught up, she would face that ending on her own terms, knowing she had balanced the ledger as best she could. Do you know who I am? She was the woman who walked out of blizzards, the ghost who hunted other ghosts, the strength that didn't look like strength until it was already too late. She was still out there, still watching, still protecting the soldiers who would never know her name. And somewhere in Fort Campbell, Master Sergeant David Hollis looked up from his morning coffee, feeling a strange certainty that somewhere in the world, someone was thinking of him. He smiled, pulled out his phone, and read the anonymous text message one more time. Still hunting. Still watching. Stay sharp. He typed a reply he knew she would never see. We are Then he deleted it, pocketed his phone, and went to teach the next generation a lesson that'd save his life. The lesson written in blizzard, snow, and darkness, and the quiet competence of a woman who needed no introduction. The lesson that strength doesn't always announce itself, that the most dangerous person in any room rarely looks the part, and that when someone walks out of impossibility and offers you 40 minutes, you listen. The sun rose over Kentucky. In whatever shadow held her, Captain Sarah Thornton continued her hunt, and the soldiers she had saved carried her forward into a future she had made possible, one lesson, one life, one transformed assumption at a time.